Hello, and welcome back to yet another completely unprofessional interview, the only show that has proven where if you let your guests talk on and on and on about what they're here to talk about, it further proves and shows to your watchers that I am completely unprepared. So, with that, we have another special guest here that we are going to chat with. He is the author of such wonderful games as the Sanction and the Cthulhu Hack. I don't have my second edition yet because I'm still waiting for everything else to come before I have it shipped from the UK. And also has contributed to many other wonderful games such as Maelstrom and likewise Symbaroum and several other games that I just couldn't be bothered to carry upstairs because we were running late. But with that wonderful, all over the place introduction, welcome Mr. Paul Baldowski to to yet another completely unprofessional interview. Sir, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing very well. It's an absolute pleasure to be here and lovely to see a little bit of your library.
And I mean, it's very easy to find because I mean, if you look up your wonderful resume that you can get on some of the RPG sites like RPG Geek and whatnot, you have and it's no lie, you have contributed to quite a variety of games. From the ones that I mentioned here to several others. Paranoia being one of them, and maybe and several that I'm aware of that those sites are always iffy. They're only as updated as much as you want to update them or other people. So several other games that I know that you personally have been involved with, but so anyways, thank you for coming on for I guess what I consider my little social experiment as people who know my channel, and I'm sure Paul you've watched all 200 videos. This my little channel that I do for fun to kind of help me get through my midlife crisis. Primarily focuses on me, wasting my retirement fund on RPG books that I didn't have when I was a child, opening up and sharing it with the world, but decided to do other things like get people on. And because I also co-host the Titterpigs podcast, and as you can tell, since Paul hasn't said anything yet quite, recently, I like the sound of my own voice. So having people on lets me carry on and on further than just looking at a book. So yes. And interview concluded. This is about me, Paul, not you. But welcome. So what I like to do, which you may have seen in some of the other interviews, is I like to do the familiar trope. If you can indulge us, and let us know the story of a little Paul Baldowski and his introduction to the gaming world.
Okay, so back in the dawn of time, when I think when I was about 12, I think I've judged it as 12. I've been asked this a few times. I've probably written about it a few times. I'm still not absolutely sure when it is. It's like carbon dating or archaeological digs where you try what was the first game? Which edition was I looking at? And so yeah, very first experience of role playing was Dungeons and Dragons
Oh,
in the red box at school during a lunch break, and I had managed to finagle myself into a situation where I could play role playing games in a lunch break because we kind of hid ourselves away.
mm-hmm.
I have to say, D&D didn't last very long. I mean, over whatever 40 plus years of playing, I have played very little D&D, but that was the introduction, and that led to basically myself and three other friends, one of whom was the individual who had DM'd that first D&D game.
Mm-hmm.
We basically gathered a little selection of games which we then played during lunch breaks. So one friend got like Call of Cthulhu, another friend got AD&D, another got Warhammer. I picked up Middle Earth role playing, which was my first role playing game. I'm clearly vaguely suicidal or something. I don't know. How was I to know? Really? I mean, to be honest, yes, it's a little bit complicated.
A wee
but
bit, yes.
but it's one of those situations where eh, I can't for the life of me think, other than the fact that Games Workshop were in their heyday at that point. That was the high point of, Ian and Steve as these sort of providing the pathway for people in the UK to more easily gain access to the role playing games that were spilling forth from the America.
Hmm.
They were importing these games, and by this point, when I was getting on board, they were beginning to, basically do Games Workshop editions. So mine was
Yeah.
this glorious purple box with a Chris Aquilos sort of Balrog on the front with a tower and a huge army swarming forth from it. Um, I have to admit that I didn't actually read Lord of the Rings till about 35 years later. So my games were not wholly. I mean, Tolkien would have genuinely been spinning like a kebab meat to, in terms of the what I was doing with his creation. But we had a great deal of fun, and it was an interesting introduction, and we sort of expanded our range. And I had, there were other games I picked up as I went on, but we
Hmm.
played from that point all the way through to when I effectively left school and headed to university. We were playing, constantly. Sometimes we'd have, whole summers where we were doing nothing but. Um, uh, and so that was my introduction. It was probably the crunchiest introduction I could have chosen. And I don't think I've been crunchier since. Maybe that was my lesson learned.
It's like getting calculus out of the way in primary school. It's just
Yeah.
all you need is just a D to pass. But once you pass, you're done with it. And to be fair, I think most everybody who claims that they read the Lord of the Rings at an early age confesses later. To be fair, I never really read it until 35 years later, so don't feel bad about that. Um, though they picked up the book, they had it, they paged through it.
Yeah.
They obviously either they tore out or skipped over the Tom Bombadil part and just read the battle of
Uh-huh.
and that
Mhm.
was that's it. They didn't really
Yeah.
indulge in it. But now I also got to admit that yes, you kind of flash back in memory because one of the secondary games that I got within my career was the Middle Earth Red Box. As I've confessed many times with my gaming group when I was younger, I was the one who was constantly trying to introduce new games rather than play Dungeons and Dragons. A couple times I was indulged, but most of the times just like no. And we carried on. But I do recall getting that, and for those who aren't aware, at least the Red Box, there really wasn't a lot of material to it. It was two or three little books, but in those books was essentially a master's of mathematical degree that was presented to you. And I seem to recall of going, "Hey," because we knew the Lord of the Rings. We had seen the Ralph Bakshi movies, and we grew up with the Rankin and Bass television shows that they did. Um, hey, would you guys want to play in Middle Earth? And I know I'm paraphrasing this because it's been 175 years. Sure. And I'm like, great. Can one of you read it? Because I have no idea how to play this game. So I think yes, that was a lot of people's introduction. But some were brave enough to go in there and try to figure it out, and us just kind of went, well, well, let's just play more D&D. So
I mean, I have to admit, definitely, I was the sort of person who dipped in, probably got the gist of it.
mhm,
I don't think I ever used the movement and maneuver or whatever table.
mhm,
It was there front and center. And I'm sure it was essential to parts of the game. I don't think I used it.
mhm,
The fun was in the critical tables. It was rolling to see how big a crit you could get during
mhm,
combat. It was maybe sort of swimming through the endless reams of spells that you might aspire to.
mhm,
um and as I said, I hadn't read it. So
Yeah.
literally, when I ran my first session, I probably had seen the original Lords of the Rings film as well.
Hmm.
That was probably about as far as I got, and I probably only got as far as Weathertop, in the reading. But it meant that in our very first session, ridiculously, the first combat was in at Bree with a group of drunken black Numenorians. There was no chance that this. The only reason that happened was they were top of the list. If
Yeah.
you go, there's a bestiary list in there, and they're the top line. I mean,
Hmm.
I don't know why, because alphabetically, presumably, but it was let's fight these guys. So yeah, and it probably gained a little bit of consistency after that. But I think from my perspective, that whole experience of each of us being the GM is
Ah,
novel. Lots
yes.
of groups these days suffer from the situation where there's one person who seems to be constantly being the GM.
Hmm.
This was a situation we were all GMs. We rotated that responsibility, but in turn, because we didn't settle, we started with D&D, but there was no sense of loyalty. I think no sense of committing to a single system. I think each of us was fascinated by the potential that existed even in the 80s. And the 80s was pretty rich with, we might think
Oh.
we're pretty fortunate now, but it was rich with all sorts of licensed, sort of games, Doctor Who, Star Trek, and then, Lords of the Rings ultimately,
Hmm.
as well as the more generic stuff like Traveller and D&D, and then you had Warhammer coming in, and there was a whole load of things going on, and it meant that yeah, we got into the gist of playing games for a little while,
Hmm.
and then somebody's pocket money would accrue to the point where they could buy something new, and they read that, and then suddenly we'd be having Call of Cthulhu or Lords of Creation or
Yeah.
Dragon Warriors or something. So
Oh.
exactly. So it meant that even now
Hmm.
the longest I the longest campaign, apart from that Middle Earth one, which I reckon probably ran nonsensically for about 2 years. I think the longest campaign I've run is maybe less than a year.
Yeah.
I am constantly at a loss, but in some ways admire the notion of these people who have shots of them in their cellars having played AD&D for the last 40 years. Yeah.
And really nothing else.
And nothing else.
And that's a concept that should be is applauded for. It's just for its for actually accomplishing that. But I
Mm,
couldn't imagine that. I mean, for
no.
me, I couldn't imagine. I'm very similar to you. I mean, as far as running a game, probably the longest I've run so far since I first discovered the games myself was probably a year and a half, and that's my Masks of Nyarlathotep game. Just because we're older now and we're constantly rescheduling because we're adults and crap comes up all the time. But back in the day, even with Dungeons and Dragons, we were moving from Greyhawk to Forgotten Realms to Dragonlance, just as these properties were coming up, Ravenloft. So we were still creating new characters and starting a new campaign, and the idea of just sticking with one wasn't even on our minds. And yeah, I mean, I'm playing in a campaign using a Hyperborea, the previously astonishing swordsman and sorcerers of Hyperborea, and we're going on over 3 years now. As a player, yeah, I can do that. Just tell me a time and a date, and I'll show up for as long as I'm able to go. But as a GM, no, I don't have that kind of attention, but or attention span to accomplish that. But those who can,
Mm,
well on you. That's
yeah.
great. So all right. So you've conquered the mines of Moria and found the confusing script and figured out the passcode to run that game, and you've moved on to others. And again, as you said, in the 80s, there was no shortage. It seemed like games were coming out all the time. Uh, Probably because it was new and people were trying to get on board, which is stated in the history. You read Designer and Dragons, you can hear about all those wonderful stories. And of course, licensing was different. What's an RPG? Oh yeah, we're Star Trek. Go ahead. Oh, we'll do whatever you want with
Yeah.
it now.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Star Wars. I mean, half. just about 90% of what we know about Star Wars was not created by Lucasfilm. It was created by Weston Games. So, I mean,
Mm.
anyways, so so we move on, and you're playing games, you're discovering new games, and as you know, as you get older, what was your first inkling into, you know, moving on from just, you know, a player just like everyone else to real game design? I mean, everyone has a game designer in them, but obviously you've moved past the here's my 3-ring binder full of all my ideas, read it please, to actually, you know, designing, publishing games. So when did that kind of turn of events occur for you?
So, I mean, I had been a designer of a sort since, I'm tempted to say, the very late 80s and early
Oh,
90s, to the extent that I ran play by mail.
okay.
And I wrote my own games. It wasn't just a matter of just, you know, a narrative being, you know, pursued with a sort of like a correspondence. I
Mm-hmm.
was writing games. The first game I wrote was Darklands,
Okay.
fantasy game. I drew an enormous map. I did exactly the thing that the advice these days is not to do. I drew an enormous map, and I ran various play-by-mail games.
Okay.
Darklands had about 3 sequels.
Mm-hmm.
I then ran a science fiction game called Nexus, which had about 3 sequels,
Mm-hmm.
and even a like a space empire battle game, which I ran. And I probably ran those for the next 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Between the late 80s and the very end of the 90s, I was running play-by-mails in
Mm-hmm.
my spare time. While, you know, at university, I carried
Yeah.
on role playing. We did like cyberpunk and vampire. That was
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, period where World of Darkness was kicking off and so forth. I unfortunately fell afoul of a tiny bit of magic, but never really got into playing it too much. But you know, I have a lot of early magic cards which I randomly picked up with my student
Uh,
money
uh,
while I was at university.
but but did you also run afoul of the fashion that accompanied Vampire the Masquerade of that time?
No,
How
no,
does
no, no, no.
so Paul? There's no pictures of you
There's no
in a
goth,
pair
Paul.
of
No.
leather pants and, you know, a leather coat and,
Mm,
you know,
no,
okay,
no, no,
oh,
no,
pity.
no. There was a heavy drinking Paul, but there was never a leather-clad Paul. No, I don't think that wasn't me.
Oh,
Um,
go on. Sorry.
so, uh, and then so yeah, I left university, got a job. I would say over the 90s,
Hmm.
my role playing then, just apart from the play by mails, the role playing just vanished. It was work by day, running play by mails at night.
Right.
Um, but it meant that I effectively spent 10 years designing games. These things, you know, that had systems to them. There were mechanics. There were random tables being created in the
Hmm.
background. You know, there was a structure to it. As I said, it wasn't just a narrative. So,
Right.
but it meant that by the early noughties,
Hmm.
I had been, you know, kind of inactive in playing, but
Hmm.
had been GMing and creating sort of endlessly.
Hmm.
And then I stumbled into a forum called paranoia.net. Now, I had played first edition Paranoia in the
Hmm.
80s. My One of my brothers got it, so he got the RPG book slightly. Wasn't into it for very long, but he got Paranoia, so he played some Paranoia. And yeah, paranoia.net was there, and I got involved with that. And at the time, Alan Varney had basically been given the responsibility by Mongoose to resurrect Paranoia. And I was one of the lucky gaggle who became the Traitor Recycling Studio.
Oh, okay.
Um, and I was one of the participants in what was called the toothpaste disaster, which was I think is it a gnosis or something, that basically the system of creating a story, a structured story over a period of time with sort of like short opportunities where you have
Hmm.
to. We did it based on letters. So for the 26 weeks, we had to create parts. We had to recreate this disaster. The disaster had already happened, but basically it
Right.
was a bunch of high programmers trying to justify what happened, and ideally, basically make everybody else responsible and themselves, completely out. No,
Yeah.
don't execute me, Mr. Computer. I had nothing to do with it. But that led into then I wrote 25 pages of the Paranoia XP rulebook. Probably the stuff that Alan didn't want to do. I think I wrote the skill descriptions,
Oh.
and I think I did a little bit of some of the service groups, or maybe the sub sections of service groups.
Mm-hmm.
But that was my first sort of paid writing gig. And that then led into, as I said, becoming a part of the Traitor Recycling Studio, because
Mm-hmm.
Alan found from this the toothpaste disaster that he had a group of talented individuals who were ready and willing to write various supplements.
Mm-hmm.
So I contributed to things like the original supplements of Crash Priority, and the equipment books, and I got the opportunity to write my own first supplement all by myself, which was the Underplex, taking the keeping the adventure inside but underneath the Alpha Complex.
Right.
And so yeah, that was my first solo writing, freelance writing opportunity, basically, which was nail biting and very stressful, and I consider very far from perfect, but some people say nice things about the supplement, so that's all good. I'm my least greatest fan when it comes to understanding. People say, yeah, what you did was good, and I'm going, was it? But yeah. So, but that then led into one of the things you held up, which was
Mm-hmm.
the Beggar's Companion from Maelstrom.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Maelstrom I picked up late 80s, I think,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, or probably around the time, actually, because that came out at the same time as Dragon Warriors and Lone Wolf, and
83 or so, 82.
yeah. So I think I'd picked that up, and maybe I probably played a little of that later in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
But when I went to university, I studied history, and kind of forced my history syllabus as far back as possible. I strongly disliked sort of modern history and politics. So
Mm-hmm.
if I could make it Elizabethan or Tudor or Stuart Civil War, something more entertaining with a few more kings and battles, and so yeah, I then got the opportunity to write for Maelstrom.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, then things, Knights Black Agents, I got the opportunity to work with Kenneth Haight and Gareth Ryder Hanrahan. Kenneth Haight being the scariest of those two. They're like, yeah.
Well, I've interviewed Ken, and both Keith and I were sweating bullets before and after, and he's definitely an imposing man. Not intentionally.
Yes.
He's not out to make you feel small, but it's just he just naturally can do that to certain people. So
yeah,
but yes.
Yeah, but then so that then rolled to, I mean, it then feels like a very long time between whatever 2004 or whenever Paranoia XP came out,
Mm-hmm.
and 2016 when I actually wrote something of my own.
Mm-hmm.
I'd sort of dabbled mainly with freelancing for other people up to then, producing all sorts of stuff. But then 2016, the marvelous David Black created the Black Hack, and within 3 months of the Black Hack coming out, Cthulhu Hack followed in, I think, May 2016, which was that first opportunity to write something which was, I'm going to say, absolutely my own, but in turn I've just said that David Black, he did all the heavy lifting. I just changed a few words.
I mean, but that was his whole point,
Yes,
that was his reason for creating it. And there's many wonderful games that are out there utilizing that particular rule system that, to be perfectly honest, if you weren't aware of, where it was coming from, it would be just like any other wonderful game utilizing a variety of rules, but the Black Hack is the foundation. So it's your own.
If anything, if there's one thing I would actually say about myself, I have a fascination with the mechanical side. I mean, maybe this is like post-traumatic stress of dealing with Middle Earth. I don't know.
Still. No child shall ever go through what I had to go through again with Mirth. Therefore, I will create a set of rule sets that will not leave them with a bloody nose and crossed eyes. Yes, and
Indeed.
it says that in the front of the Sanction, at least the copy I have. So
If we ever bump into each other in person, I can write that in for you. There's no problem.
perfect.
But yeah, so I do enjoy tinkering with mechanics.
Hmm.
So the Black Hack had the usage die as a mechanism to prevent the need to monitor
Hmm.
things like arrows and torches and stuff as you're going through a dungeon. And as I was reading the Black Hack, I thought, wouldn't that be great as something for sanity? That just seems to be perfect.
Hmm.
And so that's where that started from. That was the sort of trigger to go, yeah, that would be great for sanity. Now, how can I build a game around that?
Hmm.
And yeah, Cthulhu Hack came out, and it was a weird experience because I was on holiday at the time when I hit the trigger on drive through, and for about a week I was number one on the sort of drive through chart. That doesn't happen anymore.
No.
But at the time, that was marvelous to actually see the my book number one,
Oh yeah.
for a week, which is a bit distracting, as I said, because I was on holiday. So I kept
Paul,
checking.
stop refreshing your phone. You're here to
Another sale.
relax. You're here to relax.
Yeah.
Oh, so I've got a kind of a sidebar question. So one of the things that we didn't mention your involvement in is also with a company called All Rolled Up. So this is more of a personal question because I'm kind of interested in how that came about, your involvement with it, because of course currently it is well it wouldn't call it the publishing house, but it is the where you can acquire your games, both current games and also games that are pending. What's the term I'm looking for? Pending fulfillment through Kickstarter. So tell me a little bit about that. I'm interested in it, and as far as I'm concerned, everyone else watching is because it's my show. So
So I had the fortune of
mhm,
meeting this lovely lady called
mhm.
Philomena, in 2000. It would have been 1998.
Get that right.
Um, and we got married in 2000,
Ah.
on April the 1st, because that was funny. And yeah, part of what we took on board was the fact actually we both had a common interest in sort of science fiction and so forth. In fact, one
Mhm.
of the earliest conversations I had with her, she was at the San Diego Comic Con,
Oh.
and she called me. So it was like it was late at night effectively
Yeah.
because she was there during the day, and I had a 2-minute conversation with Richard Hatch from Battlestar Galactica. she
Wow.
she had gone up to him and she said, "Please, could you talk to my friend in the UK? He's such a fan of Battlestar Galactica." And I had a 2-minute chat with Richard Hatch on the phone, which it's what more can you ask for a lady? I couldn't do anything but marry her at that point. Um, and So yeah, gaming was always part of the deal as well. She was into board games primarily, largely tedious rail-based board games, and I obviously had my role-playing interest. So
Right.
um, we started going to this probably to we didn't really go to conventions together
Hmm.
until the early whatever tenties,
Hmm.
whatever they're called, and we we'd gone to events at that time. It would have been UK. We probably went to one of the early UK Games Expos. We maybe even Dragon Meet.
Oh.
To the events that are still more or less around. Dragon Meet's been going for a very long time.
Oh yeah.
And I was running games. I started running. I had a lot of them. It was probably a good time to start running a few of them. And so I'd gone to these events running games. And one time we were just discussing the whole business of, as a GM, how do you organize your stuff to take it into the session? Do you either have like a dice bag In America, you'll have your Crown Royal or whatever your preferred is, or you'll have like a rucksack. So you're at two ends of the spectrum. You've either got a bag which you can't really fit everything in,
No.
not admittedly roomy as a Crown Royal might be, or it's so deep that you're constantly digging around in the bottom of this rucksack trying to find the thing that you need. You know that your 20-sided die is going to be at the bottom of the rucksack when you need it the most. So we just wanted to find something in between. And so Phil had always had a sort of crafty edge to her. She always was making things, and we kind of just sat down as a design team and came up with the idea of this game roll that allowed you to put your dice and your pens and pencils and a notebook or a pack of cards into what became a all rolled up. And the very first time, it was actually 2013, we went to UK Games Expo. We had a tiny, like a foot square on the stall of Arian Games, who are the publishers of Maelstrom and Advanced Fighting Fantasy. And that was it. There was just this little stand with like 10 of these all rolled ups on it. And it kind of just expanded from there. So she then has gone from, probably over the last 10 years, she'll have created everything is created by hand. Thousands of these all rolled up game rolls, which range from very simple sort of fabric rolls made out of just standard fabrics through to Harris tweed and kind of leather, oilskin leatherette sort of type materials. But she also does, and I don't have an all rolled up hand. It's shocking. There's definitely one around here, which is, but
well, I will put a link in the description for those interested, because unknown fact is, as far as I'm concerned, I am the largest holder of all rolled ups, and if not the West Coast, but all of the continental U.S. I have not only purchased one with every game that I have backed with you, but I've also been gifted them several times by friends from the UK. And so, yes, it's my Beanie Baby. So these better go up in value.
So. Oh, sure they will. I mean, no. So we went to Gen Con.
Oh wow,
2016 or 17, because Phil actually won an Ennie without being there. She won an Ennie for a Dracula dossier themed all rolled up. So Dracula dossier won an Ennie at the same time as an all rolled up. Fantastic. So she has a gold Ennie, which she constantly swings in front of me because I was nominated for one, but I there was no chance of me winning it. It's just one of those years, and it's just, I've got an Ennie. Well, but it's well deserved, I mean, because that was 3 years in. She and effectively the company now, she runs 10 years on, and has expanded. It includes dice bags and dice trays, as well as as you said, kind of publishing my games, but she does a huge amount to support the indie industry as well, because it goes to a lot of bigger events where a smaller publisher is unlikely to be able to afford a table. So at that point, having somebody who's willing to actually represent you, and I'm happy as somebody who plays and reads lots of games to actually kind of be the salesperson for those companies that can't be there. So it's been a mutually beneficial arrangement, which wasn't included in the marriage contract.
Oh, I mean, well, good, because then it wasn't included in the prenuptial agreement. So fair.
Exactly.
So yeah, and again, it is something to behold when they're not as widespread here in the States. Obviously, you can find them at certain stores, but people do sell them, and Noble Knight resells them and whatnot. So you can find them out here, but most people, they see it like, oh my God, what is that thing? And it's just like you said, it's just the perfect mix of enough dice, enough pens and pencils, and some people may carry around a notepad, but a lot of people I just need some index cards, and and also it's the little flexible button-up dice tray. You dismantle that, and it fits neatly inside of there, and you're good to go. So yeah, definitely for those. Yeah. Oh, there. Yes, exactly. For those watching, look to the link. And again, I'm just it is a UK company, and of course there's international shipping involved. But to be perfectly honest, these things are not that heavy, and the shipping is still reasonable. Coming here to the States.
Yeah.
But so yeah.
Yeah, and absolutely, and she's actually gone to great lengths to ensure that whenever things are shipped, that they are done so as cheaply and efficiently as possible.
Oh,
So,
it gets here quickly.
mm,
I am horrible about following up on backer kits. So I'm the one of the many voices who, will shout at a creator, everyone's getting their games. Where the hell's mine? And
mm,
then I'll usually get an email back. It's like, well, you didn't complete the backer kit, stupid. So I think I reached out to Phil, or Phil reached out to me, and I think there
mm.
was something that either I purchased. I forget what it was, but it was either an all rolled up or something that had sat in in the queue on the all rolled up fulfillment, and it literally arrived in like 2 days. I'm like, don't rush. Obviously, that doesn't need to get here right away. Take your time. And regardless whether she maybe threw it a couple extra shekels in to get it here quicker, or the mail just happened to be that good, as far as postage and delivery is concerned, from all rolled up, spot on. So, but no,
Well,
okay, yeah,
not to linger on this too long, but
yeah.
actually, it is one of those things as well where people who use Kickstarter don't actually. They almost seem to imagine that everything seamlessly works and runs together.
I know.
Okay, Kickstarter has no fulfillment mechanism in it of any kind. Backer
Right.
kit, pledge management stuff is not free, nor is it
No.
connected to Kickstarter. And that's why Phil has opted to use her web store effectively,
Hmm.
because otherwise you are handing money randomly to
Right.
third parties. And often backers don't realize that. They think, I've given you 10, 20, $30. Where's my stuff?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying you're guilty of this,
Oh,
but
I am. I'll
but
admit it.
but yeah, it's one of those things where in it, because we've started doing Kickstarters, it just made more sense
Yeah.
to do it in house rather than hand yet another percentage over to yet another company that isn't Kickstarter,
Hmm.
because all Kickstarter give you is a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So there you go.
It is enlightening speaking with a lot of people about the back end of crowdfunding and whatnot, and how like you said, in the front looks like a well-oiled machine to sometimes, but behind it's a lot of people running around like chickens with their heads cut off,
Yeah.
personally taping up packages, driving stuff to the post, taking inventory, and of course dealing with people going, guess what? My fulfillment arrived, but it's completely soaking wet, smashed and torn, and someone's dog took a dump on it. Can you send me another one tomorrow? Yeah, and just so you know, the only reason why I haven't done my fulfillment this time for Cthulhu Hack Second Edition is I went all in for hard copies of everything, and I'm waiting for everything to be published. So,
Which it has done, so it must just be you now that's
oh,
causing the
God damn
problem.
it! Oh, fine. Fine. It just is. It happened the other day, I'm sure. But yeah, no, I'll be.
Yeah. No,
Uh,
they're here. Look, see this island of ignorance. See this. But
oh,
anyway, yeah.
well,
Anyway,
okay. So,
that's
thank you for indulging me in that. I do appreciate it,
yes,
because
no problem.
it's a fantastic uh, service that you provide to the gaming community. Both you and your wife. So, all right. So you've had some time, and I swear to you, we're going to get to Sanction soon. But yes, hopefully there might be 2 hours left of the Kickstarter when we're done talking. But so you've had some accomplishments. You have some credits. You've worked with several wonderful and talented people from the sound of it. You've had an impact in several different games. You're not just a one hit wonder, or you're only working in D&D. You're spread out amongst different genres, different settings, different rule types. And then, of course, you got involved and made, the Black Hack. And then after
The Cthulhu hack.
the Cthulhu Hack, I'm sorry,
You've gone off script.
the Cthulhu, again, like I said in the beginning, I mean, I just brought these upstairs 5 minutes before we pressed record. So, and I'm hoping that I grabbed the right ones too. So there was some success with the Cthulhu Hack, and likewise, it's a
Yeah.
well supported game. There's a lot of companion books and adventures associated with it. And and people like it. I mean, I know a lot of people who enjoy it. You constantly see it made available at at conventions, on online conventions, and so you continue on, but then you start working obviously on something else, which by your own admission focuses on an area of history that that not only do you enjoy, but it's a focus for you. So we come to the creation of the Sanction.
Hmm.
Can you tell the people watching, all two of them? No, there'll be more. Um, again, what brought this about? Why? The Sanction. I mean, obviously, it's an era of history that you enjoy, but this particular, associated of wonderful characters that are in this very small book. I mean,
Mm.
but there's still a lot of personality inside of here. So I'll let you talk.
So, if there's one bane to my existence, it
Mhm.
is the rabbit hole when
Ah,
you start researching something
yeah.
and you then find if you're online, you follow a link. If you are reading a book, you find you just ordered 12 other books from and
Guilty.
and I think that often happens. So I cannot uh, claim to know exactly what it was
Okay.
that triggered the idea for the
Hmm.
desanction. I know that it happened 2013,
Hmm.
2014 because I wrote about it online. So I see for the first mention of the desanction online, and um, the idea had occurred to me of I think I'd been reading about the approach and the attitude towards magic in that period of time because the Elizabethan period seemed it might be slightly wider than the reign of Elizabeth, but at that point in time, science and magic were pretty much hand in hand.
Right.
An individual like John Dee was both seen kind of as a scientist. He was responsible for coming up with new concepts around navigation and using maths
Hmm.
to be able to, make calculations that would allow, in theory, improved navigation around the world. At the same time, he was one of the individuals who would schlep his way into the court and demand money because he believed he had a way to turn lead into gold or something like that. It was happening all the time. You just need to read a few books. There was probably a queue outside. There was probably like a delicatessen ticket thing where you took there was okay, which who wants to be the next person to see a patron, and so you would go into court and you'd make these claims. So it was just this period where both magic and science are side by side. The queen is the first that she's taken over from, you know with a little complication in between, from a very powerful father,
Hmm.
who not only had had ruled England but had cut ties with the Rome. Said no to Catholicism. Oh, I'll make my own church because I want to divorce this woman, and all very complicated.
Yeah.
And it seems it's such an interesting period, and it occurred to me a very minor change, that if magic really existed rather than just being a suspicion, that people had as an excuse to explain why they had bad luck or misfortune. It was enough to generate government acts, to forbidding it.
Hmm.
So it was, something that effectively was enacted as rule of parliament, and people could be killed for using magic. So what if John Dee could convince the Queen that killing these people was not the best choice? Why not use them? Why not use them as a resource to be able to turn them to assist in the defense of the British Empire as it was becoming, slowly becoming? Notionally, John Dee is responsible for that term. Um, it's the opportunity to protect the British Empire against the burgeoning forces of the Church of Rome and the
Mm-hmm.
mean old King of Spain and all those other troll people out there. And so this has occurred to me. I think I might have already also just thought of the name and thought it sounded really good, because the notion of having a sanction, which was, a rule that was put in place to give an opportunity for people to basically be able to make a small change in the law to give people a second chance. And then, I don't know, the desanction the title maybe caught me in some way. And I then started basically writing a game. And I wrote adventures. The original version of the game had cards, it had tokens, it basically it had all sorts of stuff. But I kept running adventures at events. And we've mentioned him already. That young man Ken Height came along, all right, and I think in 2014 published a supplement for Gumshoe called The School of Night,
Mm-hmm.
which is specifically about the Elizabethan period and John Dee, and that Mr. Height has a lot. Anyway, so I struggled through that. It has to be said, in retrospect, there are other people who have come up with slightly similar ideas, one way or
Slightly.
another.
That era, though,
Um,
yeah.
Before and afterwards,
Right.
as in there are books of similar nature now about the Queen having these supernatural forces in sort of witches helping her and whatnot. But anyway, so but that was in 2014.
Yeah.
It took me 6 years of running adventures and I'd go to events like Dragon Meet and Expo, and I would run desanctioned adventures. I ran one at an event called Concrete Cow in Milton Keynes,
Mm-hmm.
and had uh, you know I had I had a lot of fun playing it, and a lot of fun running it. And I was trying to think of somebody's name there, but their name is now gone. But I will cast that aside. But basically, one of the people who was involved with early White Dwarf, people who I kind of respected as game designers and people, but not enough to remember their names at a push. But but it meant I was really struggling to come up with the game system. But then 2019, 2020,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of struck it. I thought, I think I've got it, and it was it was a variation a little on how I had evolved the Cthulhu hack out of the black hack, using the notion of this usage die. So basically having
Mm-hmm.
resources, and using a die where you rolled and you wanted to avoid getting a 1 or 2, because a 1 or 2 meant that the dice got smaller.
Right.
And I had it in my mind that if you just take a 4-sided die and you want to avoid a 1 or 2, that's a 50-50 chance of being successful. And I consider that to be one of the things that, through lots of games, especially through the 80s and 90s, and maybe even now, your average character in D&D has a characteristic that's like 10 or 11, or so. It's a 50-50 chance
Right.
notionally. I know there's modifiers and stuff that go around it. Call of Cthulhu, most of your skills end up like 50 or 60, or except for accounting, which you happen to have put 5 points in, and you've
Right.
put 5 points over there. But most of your core skills are in that sort of mid range, and it's so why not just boil this down to a single die roll? Because ultimately that 4-sided dice is doing the same job.
Mm-hmm.
And I then started coming up with the system around it. So if you got a little better, you maybe do have a D6 or a D8. You still fail. Notionally, you fail on a 1 or 2,
Right.
but you because you are getting better, your range of success is improving. I didn't want failure, so the game has what's called a falter, which is basically a success with consequences,
Mm-hmm.
with the idea that you never want to hold the game back by repeatedly hitting a brick wall. So have things move forward and make them exciting by having something weird and wonderful happen. The guards arrive, that you set off an alarm, or whatever. You get what you want, but you've just made it more complicated.
Right.
And so I wrote the rule set as a separate document for my benefit as I was thinking about it,
Mm-hmm.
and then layered on aspects to carry the desanction. So the desanction idea of basically the supernatural seeping into the world is called the unraveling, because the physical fabric of the planet, of the world around us, is unraveling as magic is seeping into, because of King Henry and his naughty antics with the dissolution of the monasteries. Basically, he's broken down this shield of faith that surrounded our country, and magic is now seeping through. And so the unraveling has its own mechanic. There's a thing called tradecraft in Sanction, which is basically, in my mind, it's a way to make villains an episodic threat. I kind of had the idea in mind of the sort of old school, sort of maybe even like radio dramas, or maybe Saturday morning sort of action, series, where the villain didn't get killed off at the end of every episode. Like, it's like these days that seems to be the way of things. We'll have a villain turn up once and then they'll be defeated.
Right.
Occasionally you'll get an arc villain that gets a whole series or something. But villains are all very throwaway these days. And I wanted ones where you could effectively say, if you come up against a powerful vampire, you need to actually achieve 4 separate things to defeat them. And that's where this tradecraft idea comes into the game. But that was a bolt-on to the core system.
Okay.
And it just gave me it almost gave me a generic rule set to be able to use to then power the D-Sanction. And so D-Sanction was a very successful Kickstarter. I had no idea how well it was going to go. It got more than 1,000 backers, which to me is kind of wow, so D-Sanction was finally out there after 6 or 7 years of pain and anguish,
and enough time has passed since no one recalls Ken Height's little venture into that same era. He's moved on.
I've gone around and I've bought all the PDFs. They're no longer available online.
Perfect. Exactly. Exactly. And he's moved on to, I don't know what young Ken Height is doing right now, but I'm sure he's doing okay, whatever. But it was an absolutely fantastic Kickstarter. And I think one of the big things that I think, really drew people to it was, one, of course, just the idea, the premise. It was this popular. I mean, it is a popular time period in British history, not just for those over there in the UK and Europe, but also here in the United States. I mean, there is countless series upon series focusing upon that particular time, documentaries, and it is just it's still, even though it's well documented, it's still considered this mysterious era. Who knows what's happening, what was really going on behind the scenes. And then likewise, as you can tell by the book, this was a what many people deem like a relatively rules light, or just like an uncomplicated set of rules that allowed you to run and exist in this world without it being bogged down by a lot of crunch, which seems to be it is popular these days, not just for those of us who are just way too tired to deal with complicated rules, or our eyes don't function quite as well, or a lot of the younger people who just don't, they just want something easier. They've been there, done that. They've gone through their crunch period. And so, and likewise, you do have a very beautiful special edition cover that accompanies it. Pookie was very kind enough to send me if you go and see Paul at a convention, he will have these wonderful little like gift boxes with the D-Sanction, a couple other pamphlets, and some other things inside that you can just buy as a whole. And not only is it convenient, but it keeps everything you need in a nice little neat box, and it kind of it falls in line with, let's keep things simple and easy to carry, like with the All Rolled Ups. And Pookie was very kind enough to send me that over for a Christmas present a year or two ago. So I've got the entire D-Sanction collection. Again, probably the largest D-Sanction collection in the United States. But I've got several. I've got 2 copies of the standard of the standard cover book. But so, all right. So here we are. The D-Sanction is a success, and you're dealing with the, as you proclaimed earlier, the trials and tribulations of fulfilling. Everything is, there's still going to be little hiccups here or there, And of course, we're dealing with the end of times, that wonderful little period that we all went through where we had to, did the desanction, it fulfilled during the world being locked down, or was it right before?
I think it fulfilled towards the might
Towards
have
the
been
end of
towards
it?
the end of 2020, towards the end of 2020.
Okay. All right.
So
So yeah,
yeah.
so you're like many people, in the hobby, dealing with those issues that we dealt with, but still everything does arrive. And we cut to, I forget what it was. It was either online grog meet or online another convention or whatever. And there's a young me who is going over a set of games, and he clicks on a particular game, says, "Oh, the desanction." I think that's how it went. The story changes in my mind every time I think about it, because to be honest, I don't. But so you run a game for me and a couple other people, and that game was called, I believe it is here, within the book,
In fertile soil.
Infertile Soil. Yes. So wonderful, wonderful scenario, and it was an investigative scenario that focused on some magical or some witchery misgivings within a particular village, if I recall, and kind of concluded um, with the PCs in a particular church. And but being what I am, because I mean the game, it being rules light, a lot of the things, such as, rather than I just roll and tell me what I find, there's a lot of actual involvement. Well, I'm going to go look under a pew. I'm going to go look here. And of course, my character focuses on what he thinks is the most important object in this entire investigation: is why is there two buckets of slurry here? For the American side, a couple piss buckets. So why are these in the church? And of course, I'm focusing all my attention on there. And and of course, after the game concludes, I think you confessed to me. It's like, I they were just there. They're not really part of it, but you were focusing so hard on it that I just didn't have the heart to tell you they meant nothing, or something such as that. Again, the story changes every time, but
From my point of view, as I recall,
yes, please.
the chaplain or the reverend or whatever, I can't remember, who was responsible for the church,
Yes,
um, actually bought the two buckets.
right.
And my intent, as I recall,
Okay,
was that they both had clean water in them. One of them for drinking
right.
from, and one of them from washing in. However, they had then turned into, by the but quite rapidly, as I recall, having been presented with these things, into the soil buckets that you were going to use. And they did become this point of fascination.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
So what occurs? What occurred shortly thereafter was a inside joke, and like so many inside jokes that persist, they're usually one sided. So any opportunity that I had to remind Paul online of these buckets, anytime that something came up, I would do so. And to the point where I made a joke. It's like, well, when I backed the Cthulhu Hack Second Edition, I said, well, there needs to be a reference to these, because this is now officially part of what would soon become the Sanction multiverse. But no, this is the the MacGuffin. This is the Tesseract, so to speak, of the Sanction verse. And then Paul showed me recently before the interview that there was a very nice reference to it within the Cthulhu Hack. And of course, I immediately demanded that, great, it now needs to become an all-encompassing magical item within the Sanction verse. So which, well, actually not demanded, made the mistake of assuming that's what you were asking me to do, because of course
yes.
I look inward more than I should look outward. That's a joke. People who know me, I don't, but still. But yeah. So and I'm holding you to this.
Yeah.
Paul said if he runs out of, if you run out of, go Go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, it's in the back of my head now. If there are to be two receptacles of power, or some such, that I need to have associated with, Nyarlathotep or some other entity, then yes, you will be responsible for it, and you can hold this up as your one true prize that
Right.
you've managed to subvert a completely offhanded minor detail from an adventure into the key MacGuffin of a campaign. So
Yes.
yes,
Yes,
yeah.
that all of the appropriate settings that will be coming out for Sanction will ultimately culminate around these two buckets, and you've heard it here first. So,
Yeah.
all right, so enough of my indulging my jokes. But so now we've moved forward, and you've had the success of Desanction. And of course, from from you telling us about your history, that you don't sit on your laurels too long. You are a person who is a game designer, it seems, at heart, and you continue to think and move forward.
Yeah.
So there was a couple things that were done for the Desanction that did come out shortly after that, and then the Cthulhu Hack Second Edition came out. So what prompted you, to, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people do second editions. We all know, and it could be a variety of things. But what was your prompt to say, "Hey, this wonderful game that people enjoy, that is popular, and people are still enjoying it, needs a second edition." What drove you to do that?
So the first edition that was published in 2016
Hmm.
was more or less followed by a, a 1.5 edition in 2017 or 18.
Okay.
So the copy that you held up is that 1.5 edition,
Hmm.
because it can as I said, when I wrote Cthulhu Hack, it was like 3 months from me putting finger to keyboard and it being published on drive through.
Right.
And so then, having played the game over a year and a half or whatever, I had enough sufficient additional ideas to basically double the word count,
Hmm.
and that's what you held up before.
Yeah.
But then, over the intervening 5 years, that was ample opportunity to continue to look at different mechanics. And as I said, mechanics are just that thing that it doesn't have to be someone else's mechanics. I'm happy to look at my own mechanics and mess around with them. And it wasn't a big thing.
Hmm.
There were a few mechanics or a few ideas which I kind of discounted or set to one side, which I want, or areas of the game which I wanted to emphasize or push into the background. And I think so. In a way, I wanted to put a firmer stamp of me on the game
Hmm.
than simply having it being a version of the Black Hack.
Right.
So it wasn't just the Black Hack with Cthulhu over it. It was, yeah, as I said, more of me. So it was an
Right.
opportunity to expand that notion of it. The Cthulhu Hack is very firmly just the copyright, public domain Lovecraft bit, which
Hmm.
is a tough thing to get a hang of. People publish Cthulhu stuff, and a lot of them probably tread ever so lightly, or probably less likely, on the toes of Chaosium and Arkham House in terms of the things that they really shouldn't be really shouldn't be using, because they're not
Right.
strictly Lovecraft stuff, or they are things like the Elder Sign, which Chaosium has a strong hold over,
Right.
in terms of the star, which was August Derleth's version of the Elder Sign. And so I wanted, again, just to re-emphasize that connection, and also take the opportunity, because it wasn't in the first edition, to firmly highlight I am absolutely aware that Lovecraft was a horrible man, a
Right.
racist, a misogynist, blah, blah, whatever aspects of his personality there were that really were not, yes, I'm aware of it.
Yes.
Let's just play a game within his creative universe.
Hmm.
He isn't here to defend himself. He's a bad man. just
Right.
just put him to one side. So it was that opportunity to sort of make Cthulhu more my my own, because the other argument is when you produce a new game with the word Cthulhu in the title, people probably sigh quite heavily. Really? Why?
Oh, come on, Cat Cthulhu. I mean, there's something for everyone, but yeah, I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
No, it is of the same vein of, do we really need another fantasy RPG with a rogue, a wizard, a fighter, and a thief?
Yes.
You can rename them all you want, but it's still the four base, that it has been here since the dawn of time. No, yeah, I get
Yes.
it. But
we end up going down the road of dangerous journeys with Mr. Gygax in his attempt to avoid the lawyers by renaming everything.
right.
So the notion was that. So I that was the aim.
Okay.
I set myself a target to do it. I fell foul of that target.
Okay.
I had between creative block, or probably without realizing it, I think the pandemic might have affected all of us in very interesting ways that we really can't account for.
Yeah.
I'm not. I cannot hone the reasons for it, but it took 11 months beyond the target. Now I have to say that's 11 months, not
Yes.
12 years.
Right.
For, not to reference another role-playing game that's come out in the last week, but
yes.
so 11 months. But
yeah,
during that 11 months, I carried on working on it. I am the first to also say that I definitely have neurodiverse aspects to my personality, which means focus can be a problem sometimes. No, I'm just joking about myself. But it just meant that it became a bit of a struggle to complete it by the end. Not least of which, there are a lot. You may be aware there are a lot of mean people out on the internet.
Yes, I'm well aware of that. Yes.
And the Kickstarter attracted a few of those, and they became problematic, and they possibly don't even realize within their mindscape that their words are causing actual psychological damage to the people that they're being mean to. It's actually it's like bludgeoning somebody.
Oh yeah, no,
with words, and it's kind of like, that's going to have an impact if you persist in doing that constantly. Genuinely, you're not helping things. So I was impressed that I managed to do, it was only 11 months late, but it was 11 months late. But it's there, and it was, as I said, the key thing behind this lovely thing was also that I met Paul Tomes, who is by day runs a hardware store, and then manages virtually every morning just to produce this just glorious sort of artwork, which litters this book. And I've already bookmarked and reserved various other pictures. As whenever I see one, it's kind of like, I like that one, I'm going to bookmark it and
it is
see if I can build a game around it.
He is absolutely amazing. I mean, I started following, he posts his pictures on social media. I started following his account, before he was associated with Cthulhu Hack 2nd Edition, and just tremendous. And I don't know him personally. I talk with him like we do on social media, just briefly in short little snippets. But my basic understanding is he's a lot of his skills are self-taught, that he's literally just made these wonderfully creative and sometimes horribly horrendous and scary pieces of artwork, still wonderful nonetheless, just self-taught and on talent. It is exceptional. And Paul, if you're listening, one of the things that kept a lot of people, or I should say decent people from going, hey Paul, what's up, is the fact that he kept on sharing, this is another thing I made for Cthulhu Hack. And he would track his creation of these pieces bit by bit sometimes. And it was a nice little teaser to keep some of us at bay, just going, okay, this is a work in progress. And for those of us who've, been through what we've all been to, one of the things that, well, let's say not all of us, some of us learned a lot about patience during the past couple of years. and other people have learned that they never had it, nor will they ever. And so they've decided to go full blown. But anyways, yes, that artwork is, and because one of the things I was going to ask was, this edition, there's maybe 3 or 4 pieces of art on each chapter, and was that a goal, or did Paul just happen to luckily fall into your lap and said, "Hey, I'm going to illustrate your game for you. You have no choice." So
somewhere in between.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, it was seeing those pieces of work, finding that I was bookmarking enough, that I had like a dozen pieces of art that I could use,
Yeah.
and so I've set them aside, and I have other bits that I have reserved for future ideas. So it's kind of like, there are some science fiction ones. I don't have a science fiction game right now, but I knew I wanted to use the images that Paul was producing. So it's a lovely reciprocal loop there between the two Pauls, that his creativity is feeding some of mine, and in turn, obviously, he at the same time is being given this opportunity to challenge and develop as an artist. And it has to be said that because I ran over by 11 months, he actually became known during that period, and then there was other work, so he actually did images for other people, and he will be the first one to say he doesn't do people very well, and that's an area that he's kind of developing. So and not to dwell on it too long, because I don't want to dwell on it too long. It means that the current edition of Cthulhu Hack has some images that are generated by AI.
Yes.
Now this again comes down to my own neurodiverse characteristics. I don't handle communications very well, despite the fact that we've been talking for an hour and a quarter. Generally speaking, if I'm dealing with an unknown quantity or asking somebody for something, I can find it very challenging. And so dealing with commissioning art, Paul was a blessing, because he was just producing great art. And I could say, I like that, I like that, I like that. But when it came down to the fact towards the end of those 11 months, when I realized I needed a bunch of stuff for the bestiary section, he wasn't there. And it was a matter of me needing the art to complete it. So it has led to using some AI. I am currently sourcing alternate art to replace it, because I understand there is a strong sense of opinion around it, and yes, how that turns out, we shall see. I suspect that people will have to swallow it in the end, because I don't think it's going away. So
no,
but that aside, however it's handled, AI here, but but then Cthulhu Hack came out, and as I said, literally once I did, that came out in June this year, and then from June the core book came out, and the softcover, hardcover, and the hardcover also, as has a more of the shiny, as with the I can't help myself with the sigil on the front of a book, and I also wrote Island of Ignorance, which is an Australia penal colony Australia one, which is the one that means now you can order your stuff, and has 2 buckets in it. That's the one with the 2 buckets in it, and a couple of other books. So it was once the plug was, it was like a dam. Once it started, I haven't stopped, and then that's, I think, why creatively I then ran into the current situation where within, despite the pain I went through in that Kickstarter, I then launched another Kickstarter.
So yes, so here we are. We've kind of, and we've skipped off a couple, key points, in your history that may have wanted to touch on, not to, diverge from it, but we're not going to turn it. But I just want to also note that, and there'll be a link to this in also the description. Your fascination and your work with Symbaroum and the website that you created, which you still maintain that. It's been a while since I've been on there, but
Yeah, so I mean,
Okay.
Symbaroum was like 2015.
Yeah.
See, that's the weird thing. I got into Symbaroum at the same time as I was writing Call of Cthulhu.
Mhm.
Not Call. Did I write Call of Cthulhu? Did I write Call of
Of
Cthulhu?
course
No,
you did.
Cthulhu Hack. Cthulhu Hack was it. And yes, I managed to sort of I produced more than 100,000 words on the Iron Pact.
Oh yeah.
Which is not, it's not particularly active now, but it has 100,000 words of articles.
It is, I want to say it is the most helpful website for first time GMs running Symbaroum, especially the initial adventure. I reference that so many times because not to take from Symbaroum, it is a fantastic game, everyone. But like with any games that rules and descriptions are translated from one language to another, some things are lost in the translation, and there were several times where I'm sitting down with Symbaroum and likewise playing the game, going, does this make sense? Is this how it's supposed to work? I don't know. So it's it was very nice to be able to find not having to go to some place like Reddit and see someone yelling at me about how I don't understand it, or going to an actual play, which they're not playing Symbaroum, they're having a conversation like we are with occasionally throwing dice, but to see a nice website that not only provides you with tools to understand and play the game better, but also gives you a method and means to grow and expand the game itself and understand it better. And this was before that, they've come out with their wonderful stack of books, further expanding it. But it was
Mm.
nice to go there and just reference that and have it there as something to reference in case is there something on there about this, and go on there and look for it and go, oh, okay, yes,
Yeah.
there is something on there. So
Yeah, I
thank
mean,
you
it
for
was an
that.
opportunity for me to deconstruct a game again. It was
Hmm.
kind of like looking at the game and working out how it could be used because it
Hmm.
has a very specific and maybe even slightly unusual rule set. And it's one of those things when people go, "Oh, it's by Free League. It runs on year zero, does it?" No,
No.
no, it doesn't run on year zero. And yeah, it was an opportunity for the website, for me to come back to it and approach it in different ways, create new creatures for it, look at the skills and the way they worked,
Hmm.
actually deconstruct the scenario that comes in the Symbaroum core book, The Promised Land, and
Yes.
look at ways to expand it and rewrite it and approach it in different ways. And and I think in the same way with I'm doing it again with Cthulhu Hack.
I'm changing your RPG Geek profile as we talk. So carry on.
The introductory adventure that's been in there since 1.5 is Save Innsmouth, which
Yeah.
originally was a few pages. It's
Hmm.
now up to like 25, 26
Wow.
pages
Cool.
because it's become my introductory adventure for Cthulhu Hack, and it's
Hmm.
been an opportunity to develop and twist and look at the way an adventure can be used to actually introduce somebody to the key elements of a game, which both Promised Land does for Symbaroum and Save Innsmouth does for uh, Cthulhu Hack. I'm
Yeah.
doing it
Yeah.
again and again. But anyway,
Yeah.
yes,
No, and the Promised Land is one of those adventures that definitely needs a bit of fine tuning here or there. So,
yeah,
so thank you for that. You've made, yeah,
my pleasure.
the second time I ran it was a lot easier. The first time there was a bit of a and if you want to see me stumble through it, it's actually recorded on James Corp. That's JAMES CORP, his Chambers of Roleplay channel, and you can see me stumbling through the Symbaroum rules on YouTube. So if you want to have a good laugh, it's in my playlists. You can click on that and enjoy me sitting there pretending like I I guess roll. You it missed. Let's move on. So yeah. So Desanction. Again, wildly popular. The Cthulhu Hack, second edition. Obviously, a few little speed bumps here or there, but still, again, a wonderful addition and to the original role playing game that you created. But that wasn't enough. You want more, Paul. And so, being a glutton for punishment, like you said, you started another Kickstarter, which finally brings us to the most important thing while we're here is to talk about your current Kickstarter of Sanction. I would imagine that is the label of the rules that you've created within the Desanction, and are presenting it as I hate this term, but maybe you can think of one better. But as a generic role playing system for you to utilize within any setting that you would like to utilize it for. It's going to be very similar to the other games that you produce. It's going to be relatively small in its capacity. You're not going to be inundated with rules, about 35 pages or so. And so were you that, I mean, this may sound bad, but you've created this rule set for the desanction, and you firmly felt that this is a great set of rules that I've created. This can be something much like the Black Hack is, that other people can utilize to create other things, like I did with the Cthulhu hack. So the rules of the desanction are that strong. So I'm going to go ahead and give this to people and see what they can do with it. Or was it something else like that, or something in between?
It was effectively the other way
Okay.
round, in that I was logging on in the morning and looking at social media and finding people posting that they had run a game using the desanction
Oh,
as
okay.
the system of choice.
Okay.
And when that game being run is Rogue Trooper from 2000 AD,
Oh yeah.
or it's some like an occult horror game
Mm-hmm.
based on there's lots of 2000 AD driven hacks apparently, but people were using the desanction system
Mm-hmm.
as a basis for running games of their own.
Okay.
Now, admittedly, it might only have been a couple of people, and I just saw a lot of posts about it. But it was interesting that it was happening without my encouragement necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not I'm not going around sending people copies of my game to say, would you like to hack this
Yeah.
into a cyberpunk game by any chance? And so the fact that people were doing it on the fly by themselves, the nature of Cthulhu hack and the desanction
Mm-hmm.
are very much, as you said, very slender volumes. The mechanics are very simple. And the notion is there that, when I've run Cthulhu Hack, I can, generally speaking, take an adventure from any other Cthulhu game
Mm-hmm.
and run it without much thought beyond reading the adventure.
Yeah.
I will read the adventure and then it's converted on the fly. I don't spend time doing it either. It's that simple, so the notion was, I can do the same for desanction. People are already doing it. And then last year, I ran Delta Green's Impossible Landscapes using desanction
No
for
way.
36 weeks.
It's
Okay.
it's a long campaign, but yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it was all run with the desanction effectively. And so it was I'm thinking, yeah, so this has got legs. And the fact, as I said before, that effectively the system had been written before desanction. So it was written so desanction could be layered around it.
Mm-hmm.
Originally, I called it like the utility system, but then
Okay.
the sanction part just stuck more and
Yes.
more, and because it was funny in most cases, people were coming up with different variations on the sanction, and so it was, it just seemed the right way to go. So I then thought, I can take that approach, and so with the notion is that, as I mentioned before, the desanction has things like tradecraft, and it
Mm-hmm.
has favors, which are angelic, like cantrips, basically from old D&D, that allow somebody to cast like a really minor spell. These are like extra add-ons, plugins to
Mm-hmm.
the system. And the notion was, use the core system. The core system is about, there's a selection of tables which allow you to create a character, but
Mm-hmm.
also to create a very loose backstory for that character.
Yes.
Because in desanction you determine your past career, the occult organization that you were previously involved with, the occult book that you read, and
Mm-hmm.
these influence what skills you get within the game. But the notion is not only skills, but yeah, you can then build on that backstory, how you got involved, why you got involved, who you were before. They influence the game, and without overdoing it, to me, that's enough background for a character. It's as opposed to those games where you sometimes sit down to a pre-gen that's 18 pages long and you probably needed a fortnight to prepare for the game to get used to anyway. But
Yeah.
but the idea is that you can create a character in a couple of minutes, which is the same with Cthulhu Hack. It's always been the point to make it really quite straightforward and simple.
Oh,
The other part is challenges.
uh-huh.
So as I said before, you have the resources that you use, and you roll a die, and you don't want to get a 1 or 2, basically. So you use your resources to meet these challenges, and when you roll, you either succeed or you falter, which means you succeed with consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the core of Sanction. And the notion is that the rule set I wrote for effectively to use for the D-sanction was exactly that, though. It was like the mechanical part of it. What
Right.
it didn't have was the bit which involves my brain turning the mechanics into something that you can then use for yourself. Clearly,
Right.
people were able to do that themselves.
Oh, yeah.
But I wanted to make this basic rule set into a toolbox that you could then use to run your own hacks
Yeah.
of the Sanction.
I mean, much like Call of Cthulhu, which you are the author of, started out. If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong. But the rule set for Call of Cthulhu started out strictly for that, and then basic role play, the generic role playing system came after that. But if I'm wrong, let me know. But and I think a lot of games do that. I don't think any game other than maybe GURPS starts. I mean, and even though there's a history behind GURPS that some of us know about, but no system strictly starts out to be, here's a generic system for you to do whatever you want. Things like Deadlands and things such as Call of Cthulhu may. And again, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not a historian. Go yell at Shannon Applecline and tell him to correct me. But these systems, started off as maybe something to, well, this will be the system was made first, and say this would be great for Deadlands and this would be great for the D-sanction. And then because you're so focused on that, not realizing that, oh, this could be something that other people use for others. And I would assume that in most cases, a lot of times that's what occurs in some of these games from the past of, oh, you're using the Call of Cthulhu rules to, to game in the Wild West? Huh. That's interesting. Oh, you're using it to play in the world of Stormbringer? Oh, that's fantastic. We're going to take the license. Don't ever do this again. But, and things go on from there.
Yeah.
So the Kickstarter is a success. And I'm sorry if I interrupt you, because I know you were talking about it, but I wanted to, if you were focusing back on the rule set itself, something else you want to elaborate on. I apologize if I cut you off. So besides,
no.
Okay. Because the, looking what Paul spoke about here is also in relative detail on the Kickstarter site, but the Kickstarter is a success. Congratulations. It is currently at 8,300 and some change. You have reached your third Kickstarter goal, which the features that are being funded by these Kickstarter goals are settings to essentially get you off your feet, to enjoy this game and hopefully inspire you to create your own. But we have the agency, we have Thruster Gold, and Safety Lies in Fear. Agency is dysfunctional intelligence operatives wage a secret war against enemies too dark and obscure for the public face of espionage to handle. So a spy type setting.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have Thruster Gold. when the overlord defeated and the hero dead, chaos reigns amongst the factitious rebels, and only your gaggle of mismatched minions can handle it. A pulp setting. Okay, so I have a question about that, because the agency, I played enough games like Delta Green and whatnot that I get that, it's
Yeah.
and
Oh,
so,
it's, although the agency is more angled towards, as I said, dysfunctional. So it's like
yes.
slow horses, or even like the X-Files, where you have agents who are kind of pushed aside
Oh,
by the core. So they are pushed into some distant office or basement or
hmm,
town off elsewhere. And so that's the idea behind the
oh, got it.
agency.
Okay, right. So
Yeah.
so we have Thruster Gold.
Thruster Gold.
Can you give me a little bit more detail about that?
So the notion here is that, like the classic pulp sci-fi, sort of Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers, those sorts of characters of the 30s, and so the radio dramas and the comic strips that followed. But the notion is that the action has happened, as in, so this hero, this bombastic hero, has swept in, and he has been responsible for the death of the Overlord, and in theory has sacrificed himself in the midst of it. And you are playing the minions of the overlords, because the notion here is, and we often don't consider this,
Yes.
bombastic hero character, was he really doing it for the good of everyone, or was he just driven by an overwhelming ego and a massive amount of testosterone? Because, let's face it, that seems to be what generally happens. If you sit and watch films like Flash Gordon, there's a certain amount of resistance to the notions that are being put forward by the hero. So the idea is, you're not only you're playing in the aftermath, but you're actually playing the minions of the person who is perceived to be the bad guy.
Right.
So the factious sort of fractious factions
Hmm.
are the people who were once enslaved, but they weren't really enslaved. Notionally, the fettered world is basically a group of destroyed. They were like realms which have been rescued by the Overlord
Uh-huh.
and chained into this overarching planet that is made up of lots of different territories.
Okay.
But you, as minions, are now left to basically pick up the pieces and try and deal with situations that arise as these factions are fighting with each other. And you get the general notion of shades of grey. Are we the bad guys, or were we the good guys all along? And the egotistical heroes just screwed everything up by killing the one thing that was keeping everybody together.
There is a reason why many of us laugh so hard at the Zap Brannigan character on Futurama, and I think that kind of that nails
Yeah,
that. So,
indeed.
and then we have moved on to Safety Lies in Fear. Henry VIII shattered the monastic network of Catholicism. Sorry, and took yeah, I'm Catholic too. I should know how to say it. And let's see. Sorry, I've lost my place. But something power and okay, and took the wealth and power for his own. Yes, but something
So
remains for the treasure seekers and scavengers. Something waits to be found. So, go ahead. Sorry.
so we haven't quite reached this yet. You
Right.
you
Oh, you
you've
haven't. Okay.
you've
Oh,
overacted.
I'm
So
looking at
so
dollars. I remember.
yes, I
I'm a
know.
colonial, and it doesn't translate over here. So I haven't reached that yet. So
So that's the next goal.
yes.
So safety lies in fear. If you look in, I think page 4 of your rule book, it feels
Yep.
like a school thing. If you look at page 4 of your copybook, we can then work through the formulas on that page.
Yes.
There's a timeline in there, and one of the first dates is the 1530s, when Henry VIII, in this desire to divorce his wife, and he cuts ties with the Church of Rome, and he dissolves the monasteries, and doesn't just dissolve them. He, sort of ravages them for their treasures and stuff, because they're
Mhm.
full of gold plate and whatever else. But the result of that 20, 30 years later is the Sanction. So it goes back to the point where this started to happening. So this is the start of the unraveling, where this selfish act of greed basically begins to unravel the fabric of reality.
Oh.
So the notion is that these monasteries and priories have been razed to the ground. They're just ruins, but the individuals who at the time, lots of people were being pushed to the countryside, from the countryside into the cities in search of work because of this. Over this century, landowners are beginning to take more and more for themselves, and so there's less common land. So there's less, you either work for somebody or you find a way to work for yourself. So the notion is that people who are seeking to make their own fortunes become effectively dungeoneers.
Right.
So without sort of adding too much fluff around it, the
Yeah.
notion is that this is an opportunity to play dungeons in a historical setting,
Yeah.
because you will be able to go and follow the rumors and stories and folklore, which as a role player you will have built up half of your library around folklore at this point.
Right.
And if you haven't, you should go out there and find the Reader's Digest book about folklore. That is one with like a thick black book with
Yes.
anyway, that one, you should get that one.
I
Anyway,
have it. I have it, and unfortunately, those who are familiar with the cover of the book, unfortunately, has been ruined by the Buffalo Man from January 6th because they share a striking resemblance.
Wow. You
But
can
yeah,
get a Sharpie and just go over that. Get some duct tape, whatever.
that costs
So
40 bucks to ship. No, carry on. Carry on.
but yeah, so that is full of folklore is full of
Yes.
legends and stuff. And the nature of religion was that we were constantly going through periods where favor would be lost, and they'd have to find ways to hide their treasures or build passages between one building and another. So there are just like a natural network of dungeons underneath England at this point, and it was an opportunity. Reality's unraveling, creatures are coming out, supernatural entities, fae, and so forth, and you have dungeons. So
Yeah.
you can do dungeoneering in Henry's England.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so that one hasn't hit yet, but
Not quite.
but there's a fourth one. So if it surpasses that, there's one final one here. In the midst of two buckets. No, wait, sorry. Let me restart. In the midst of shades. I'm trying to squeeze mine in there.
Really? Are you? I didn't notice.
So in the enlightened age of science, industry, and expansion, under the benevolent patronage of Queen Victoria, you are the vilified, disproven, and ridiculed members of the Ghost Society. So what is this setting about?
So it's almost so in a way, a lot of the interesting stuff comes out of these unwanted these people who are pushed to want they're
Yeah.
unwanted, or sort of their views are not no longer believed in, and very much during the Victorian period, the likes of Charles Dickens during it, and towards the end of it and the 20th century, had likes of Arthur Conan Doyle, people who led respectable lives, published authors who nevertheless in their spare time looked for ghosts,
Yeah.
believed in ghosts in the afterlife. So the notion here is again similar to Desanction, we just twist it ever so slightly.
Mhm.
And society doesn't believe in the supernatural.
Yeah.
Science is beginning to dominate during the Victorian period, but you, as a member of the Ghost Society, have persisted in your views. You are, virtually, spat upon and vilified by
Mhm.
the science community and the public because
Yes.
they don't believe. But there is something to it, and the notion is that there are it feels like Victorian Ghostbusters, probably, but I mean the idea is,
Yeah.
you have the opportunity to be this group of people who, basically go out there and deal with supernatural threats, and at the same time, you have society absolutely not believing what you are doing or why you are doing it. Um, so expect no support in your efforts as you
Yeah.
try to save the world.
Oh, sounds familiar. So, oh, okay. So, sorry.
And there
Yeah.
there is notionally beyond that more stretch goals like the Red Watch, which
Yes.
is kind of briefly mentioned. That's basically the notion of that is H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds.
Oh.
which basically it takes the assumption that the War of the Worlds kind of happens more around the Second World War. The Martians have the same experience, but in the tail end of the invasion, a second group of Martians arrive, effectively the Martian Senate, and highlight that those who attacked Earth were in fact a rebellious group of warlords who took to attacking Earth without the backing of the Senate. And so now, in a world that's ravaged both by the Second World War and by the Martian overlords, you, as members of the Red Watch, are basically agents who are working for both the Earth governments and the Martian Senate to deal with the remnants of what's left behind by the this multiple conflict on our world. But that's kind of way off. That I felt there needed to be a reserve stretch goal if depending on the success, and we are only halfway through at this point, and I'm really happy to have got where we are. And as with Cthulhu Hack, I mean, I've got to show off the merch. Yes, I mean,
absolutely.
I did watch, but like we have sort of like dice trays, and I'm going to get the wrong angle, and that's an arts like dice bags. My Phil has been busy already producing stuff, and the artist Marcin, who did he's done some illustrations for Against the Dark Master and some other books. He's just produced some lovely character images, one of which I posted today as which will be part of Agency. And yeah, it's another opportunity where I've kind of stumbled across an artist who's very easy to work with, thankfully, due to my fear of commissioning art.
Well, I'll be perfectly honest. It does sound like that you have all these wonderful settings that you've already created, that there's not going to be much else left for people to make. So come to my blog and pick up my setting, the Infinity Buckets for Sanction, coming soon. So,
well, I mean, so actually,
no, I'm kidding.
When we hit 6,000, one part of the stretch goal was actually to make for community content. Basically, there will be a community content license.
Yes,
one already exists for the D-sanction, but obviously that's very specific to the D-sanction, and I wanted to extend that. So that's now been funded, and so it means that those cheeky devils who've already produced various hacks of the D-sanction can happily do it, and will be able to do it afterwards, and even make it for their own little pennies if they want to, and make money from it. So yeah, that's already been funded as part of the Kickstarter.
Fantastic. So there is 10 days left to the Kickstarter, and so and very much like Mildra did. Once we're done here, this is going to be going up right away. So it'll be up past your bedtime, but it'll be up. And so for those of you who are watching, there'll be a link to the Kickstarter. You can find it by just searching for Sanction RPG or Sanction RPG Kickstarter. It'll pop right up on the top of your list. But it's absolutely sounds like a fantastic game. And as someone who has played Sanction, yes, everything that Paul says is true. It is definitely pliable and malleable to make and utilize for just about any setting. And the fact that you used it to run Impossible Landscapes proves that. Because even with the Delta Green rules, just that game is something that's not easily run. Because woof, no spoilers, but wow, it's quite the scenario.
Yes.
So
yes, it gave me nightmares.
But one thing I know you will never have to do if you use Sanction to run Impossible Landscapes is every time your agent gets injured, everyone looks at each other and says, "What are the healing rules again for Delta Green?" Because we always forgot every single time. Just like, how do they work again? I don't know. What page is it on? Whereas it's clear and easy to find within the Sanction, no problem. So Paul, anything else you'd like to add to the Sanction? Because it is definitely something that I feel is worth backing. And I've backed it myself, but I just want to make sure that I provided you with the platform that you needed to spread the good word about this wonderful game. So Or
Well,
Mhm,
I mean, I don't think there's much more to add.
mhm,
I really have really enjoyed,
mhm,
sort of coming up with the original system.
yep,
I've enjoyed coming up with the genre, ideas that are making up the stretch goals. And as I said, that for me, and I think this is important for all creators,
mhm,
it's great to see other people playing and using the game, but also being very visible and vocal about doing it.
right,
As we kind of mentioned earlier, there's a lot of negativity on the internet. It's much harder sometimes to find the positivity on
yeah.
the on the
Oh,
internet. And from my perspective, it's been great to actually do this. Part of the reason I am doing it is because of that positivity of other people, other players, other creators actually using the desanction to
mhm,
insanely run games of whatever Judge Dredd or whatever it was,
yeah,
that which was another example. And so from my point of view, it's a very positive experience for me, and has allowed me to recover a little bit from the Cthulhu
right.
hack.
Oh, absolutely. And again, people be nicer. I mean, nothing. I mean, I've seen some of the things that have been slung on the internet, and at the end of the day, was it worth it? No, it's not. So just be nicer, be more understanding of people, who are going through. You have no idea what they're going through, and all they're doing is trying to provide you a fun game as fast as they can. This is not Far West. You're not running off with the money and gonna, send a map after 8 years and say, okay, no. This we all know. We should all be smart enough to know that, when people creating and backing a game, individual creators, this is not a normal process. And it's just consider yourself lucky that this type of foundation exists, where this is something that we would not have available to us at all in the past years. The idea that the self publishing and there's these platforms that can get these wonderful games out to you. No, this would have been, Paul, you would be still standing on the corner, handing out pamphlets to the D sanction and going, please, play my game. And no, go away, street urchin. No, I will not play your game. I am busy. So
And what's with the buckets?
as he puts a shilling in the bucket,
Oh,
plunk there.
not that one, sir. Don't put it in that one.
So Paul, it has been a wonderful, wonderful chat. I'm so glad that you can make it on here. And of course, as always, you're welcome to come back anytime to talk about this game, or anything else that you produce. And maybe next time, the for those that don't know, I do a podcast called the Titter Pigs. We are so backlogged with that, and Keith is busy. But I'd like having an additional platform to talk to you, but maybe even have you come on and talk on the Titter Pigs next time, or you're just going to be my personal secret and I'm keeping it all myself, and Keith can just sod off. But either way, it's your gain. And but still, Paul, again, thank you so much. And there we go. This has been yet another completely unprofessional interview. I hope I cut out the time that I walked away to bring my dogs in. And if I didn't, enjoy. But we will see you next time. Coming up soon is we've got Scott Malthouse from the Trollish Delver coming on. And also we have Mike Evans from DIY RPG. And so looking forward to that. So please subscribe if you would like to see another interview with these creators, and hopefully we'll have more soon. This may not be just a September thing for my channel. For those who are waiting for me to do an unboxing soon, I'm enjoying this too much. I'm having more fun talking to people, so I will get back to the unboxing soon enough. So with that, Paul, the third time, thank you, and everyone, take care. Have a wonderful day.